Alright, can you believe that King Arthur, the guy we all think of as the greatest king of Camelot, didn't even start out with a royal title? Nope, he wasn't born in a castle or given magical swords as a kid. In fact, he was just a regular orphan living with his uncle, who was definitely not royal material, and definitely not the sharpest sword in the armory. And get this, he's the one who ends up pulling Excalibur from a stone to become the King of England. If this sounds like a completely random turn of events, well, you're not alone in thinking that. So, let's rewind and talk about how this whole thing starts, because you might be scratching your head after hearing that Arthur was just a normal kid living with his uncle, Sir Ector, who's really just a guy who has no idea what's going on. Arthur was just there, living a pretty chill life, for an orphan, doing things like helping around the house, and getting bossed around by his cousin Kay, who was basically the worst at everything. I mean, he was the type of guy who was probably the worst at every sport, the worst at sword fighting, and probably the worst at family dinners too. Arthur was stuck in the background of this whole royalty mess, with no clue that one day he would be the one to pull the sword from the stone and become king. But we all know that's not how things usually go down, so how did he get to that epic moment? The twist, though? Arthur's whole existence is the result of one really bizarre situation. The legendary Merlin, yes, the wizard, literally takes Arthur under his wing because he's the only one who sees potential in this completely unassuming kid. And it's not like Arthur asked for any of this. Merlin's like, I see greatness in you, and Arthur's like, dude, I'm just trying to learn how to make a proper sandwich. Merlin's also not your typical wizard. This guy is more like a quirky old man who doesn't know how to stop meddling in things. He decides Arthur needs to be trained in a way that's completely random, so he turns him into animals. Yeah, because when you're trying to make someone a great king, you definitely start by turning them into a fish and a bird. I mean, who thought that would be a good idea? But Arthur gets to experience life as different creatures, and in a completely random turn of events, it works. Arthur learns important lessons about leadership, and by the time Merlin's done with him, Arthur's like, alright, so I guess I'm ready to rule the whole kingdom now? Now let's talk about Excalibur, the legendary sword. So, one day, a random stone appears in the middle of London, with a sword jammed in it, and the inscription reads, whoever pulls this sword from the stone shall be king. Now, doesn't that sound like asterisk a ridiculously high-stakes game of pull the sword out and you're the ruler of everything? Like, who does that? Imagine if, like, today we had a stone in Times Square that just said, whoever eats the biggest pizza slice becomes president. How many people would try? A lot. Well, guess who actually pulls it out? Yup, Arthur. This kid who's been a fish and a bird just grabs the sword like it's his newest IKEA purchase and boom, just like that, he's the King of England. Meanwhile, everyone else is standing around looking at Arthur like, wait, what? How did he just do that? The knights, lords, and every other wannabe ruler just stare at the kid like they're watching a magic trick. Did that really just happen? Arthur's cousin Kay, who was all, I'm going to be the king because I'm the firstborn, is probably sitting there like, wait, what? How is this happening? This is rigged. But nope, Arthur's the one holding the sword, and guess what? He's now the king, with a crown and everything. I mean, imagine you're just a kid, trying to figure out your place in life, and suddenly, you're the leader of an entire kingdom. This would be like you getting picked as a team captain for a school project, and suddenly, you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company with no experience at all. Insane, right? But just because Arthur's now a king, doesn't mean things suddenly get easy. Oh no. The kingdom is full of complicated politics, jealous uncles, betrayal, looking at you, Mordred, and just generally people trying to undermine him at every turn. Yet, somehow, Arthur's got his wise mentor Merlin, who probably spends most of his time blabbering about weird prophecies and getting into comical magical mishaps, but hey, he kind of helps in his own bizarre way. And then there's the whole Excalibur thing, because what good is being king if you don't have a magical sword that people are constantly telling you is super important? So Arthur spends his time wielding the sword, trying to make sense of his role as king, while also dealing with the absolute chaos of having royal responsibilities, like running a kingdom, keeping knights in check, and basically fighting everyone who challenges him. But hey, it all pays off when he finally brings round table diplomacy into play with the Knights of the Round Table, where everyone can have a seat at the table, even if they're just random dudes trying to prove they're the best knights. So, long story short, Arthur went from being a totally regular kid with no idea what was going on to one of the most famous kings in history. All it took was a magical sword in a stone, a lot of training as random animals, and a wizard who apparently thought messing with his life was a good idea. Do we all wish we could be like Arthur? Maybe not the whole magical sword part, but who wouldn't want to go from being a nobody to the king of it all? It's kind of wild, and honestly, I think we can all learn a little something from this half-baked legendary origin story. Asterisk maybe destiny isn't as complicated as we think. Sometimes, it's just about pulling a sword out of a rock and going for it. No big deal, right?